Hey everybody, Smart Silver Stacker here. Welcome to another live stream. Boy, we have a lot to go over today. Of course, we are inching closer to war. It's looking more and more like we are going to go to war here, folks, and we're going to get into all of that news. But first, before we do that, I want to address something, and that is why all of this that we've been covering lately in regards to the geopolitical instability around the world, the brink of World War III, etc., is very relevant to the precious metals, gold and silver. Because, of course, at the heart of this channel, that is what we talk about. But I have a story for you, which we're going to get into first, which illustrates just why all of this is so very relevant to gold and silver indeed. So let's get right into it. And before we do, real quick, just do me a favor and put a 1 in the chat if you can hear me loud and clear, if everything's coming through okay on this live stream. All right, so here's the headline, and this is from kind of a obscure news agency, the New Straits Times. This is a Malaysian news agency, I believe, and the headline is government to revisit using gold dinar as reserve currency. This is according to the Malaysian Prime Minister. And so I want to read a little bit about what he said here to you and why I think this could be one of the first signs, not really the first signs, we've been getting hints that this is coming for a while, but now that the lines are being so clearly delineated between the forces here, between the rival camps on the global stage, why I think we may be on the verge of a significant move in the de-dollarization trend that we've been witnessing. Okay, so here we have Prime Minister Datuk Seri. Oh no, what's going on here? Okay, here. Sorry, folks, technical difficulties on my end. I want to read this quote to you from this news story. But the bottom line here is that the Malaysian Prime Minister is considering a return to a gold-backed dinar currency. And he says he's going to be discussing this during an upcoming meeting on Islamic economics and finance, which is going to be held in December. And this is the quote from him. He says, "We want to start the use of the gold dinar despite limited conditions." And he goes on to mention that trading with China has already been transitioned to the ringgit and the renminbi. The renminbi, the Chinese currency, the ringgit, the Malaysian currency, to 25%. So they're already de-dollarizing. I mean, we've already seen that significant trend. And then this is the really notable part here. He says, if we can get between 5 and 6% of Islamic countries using the gold dinar, it would be a positive start as it provides strength and reduces dependency on the US dollar. So this is very interesting. It's not limited to Malaysia. Of course, he's talking about getting like a pan-Islamic movement to dump the dollar in favor of gold. Now, this isn't the first time we've heard about the gold dinar. Of course, I think we all remember what happened to Muammar Gaddafi. So I'm sure that some of you out there are busily typing into the comments, Malaysia is about to get a regime change or something like that. But I think that the U.S. might have their hands a little bit full to address this guy at this moment. And, he goes on to mention here that he said the use of local currency for trade was well received, particularly by China and the Asian countries, namely Indonesia and Thailand. So you got to remember, this part of the world already has been busily de-dollarizing. This is a headline from the Asian nations, the Asian briefing. So those are Association of Southeast Asian countries from earlier this May. They were already looking to increase their local currency trade, reduce their reliance on the US dollar. And so, this is the first time I've heard of them talking about going to gold, but it's not the first time that we've heard nations in the Islamic world talking about going to gold. Of course, we're going to do a little bit of a recap here before we get into today's news, but this is a headline from Russia briefing from March 7th about how Russia and Iran, their central banks, have been collaborating on a gold-backed stablecoin currency. So, not only are these countries talking about using the local currencies, the renminbi, the ruble, the ringgit, the rupee, all of these local currencies, sounds like there's a significant amount of interest in going to gold. And so, of course, if we do see gold come back on the stage as a way of settling international trade, that likely will be very positive for the gold price because it will create a lot of demand for gold itself. Of course, if you want to buy gold, check out sdbullion.com. That's today's video sponsor. We've got a link down in the description. Got some great deals over their deal page, and right now, new customers can get gold or silver at spot by visiting sdbullion.com/news. So check them out. If you like this channel, it's a great way to support us, to support our sponsors. But, there's going to be a lot of appetite in the Arab world right now for de-dollarization. This is something they've already been working on. We've already seen the UAE selling oil to India for rupees. We've seen President Xi Jinping courting all of these OPEC Gulf energy producers at the Gulf Summit last year, the Gulf China Summit in Riyadh, trying to get them to sell their fossil fuels for renminbi, or the Chinese yuan. It's got a couple different names, that Chinese currency. But now, given the geopolitical tensions around the world, given the outcome of the hospital attack, we talked about that in the last live stream. I'm not going to get too into that, but regardless of who ends up being culpable for that, the Arab world is going to hold that against Israel and her ally, the United States. So, if there was an interest in de-dollarizing before, that interest just got amplified significantly. Hey, HVAC Residential Basics, hello, see you in the chat there, sir. Longtime viewer. Got a lot of longtime viewers in the chat. Hello to all of you. Thank you so much for joining. Hey, if you haven't done it yet, please smash that like button. Help get this information out of there. We've got 230 people on the live stream, which is awesome. 46 thumbs up. Let's see if we can get that to 100. That would really be fantastic. Now, let's take a little bit of a break here to look at the markets and see what's going on, because despite the fact that everybody's attention is focused on what's going on in the Middle East, we still have a very significant economic crisis playing out here in the U.S. Here's the 10-year yield, now up to 4.94%. The bond sell-off continuing today as markets largely across the board in the red. We got stocks in the red. We got gold and silver slightly in the red today. Gold still putting on a pretty good show. Gold spot price at 1968 there. That's a pretty nice recovery from the low 1800s that we had just last week, I think it was. So despite the fact that there's some weakness in the markets here, the precious metals seem to be holding up okay. But the big problem here is that the U.S. debt markets continue to sell off and yields continue to spike. So just keep in mind that all of those banks, all of those financial institutions out there that are sitting on these portfolios of devaluing U.S. bonds, every time this interest rate ticks up, their unrealized losses get a lot worse. And, it's not just the bonds. Remember, it's also their mortgages, all those low yield mortgages that the banks are sitting on, that the mortgage yield now I think is around 8%. So, if you've got a mortgage that is yielding 2 or 3%, that also is an asset which has declined in value significantly for these banks. And, a lot of the banks will just say, well, we're just not going to realize those losses. We'll just hold the bonds or hold the mortgages until maturity. But the problem is, as we witnessed in March, sometimes you have to sell some of those assets to raise liquidity. And right now, the losses are mounting on those banks. So don't get too distracted by the war. I mean, that's one way that these wars are very convenient from the folks here in the U.S., is they, distract from the financial crisis, which is ongoing. And so it makes it a little bit easier for that perception management game that the Fed is already engaged in. Now, so we've talked about why this is important to gold. I get a lot of comments when we talk about these geopolitical events around the world, and people say, hey, man, stay in your lane, stick to gold and silver. Well, obviously, if the results of this geopolitical calamity that we're witnessing is that the Arab world wants to adopt a gold reserve currency, a gold dinar, then all of these events are very pertinent to the precious metals. And this is another example of why any inflation hedging asset is going to be important. This is from yesterday. Iran urges Muslim countries to sanction Israel after Gaza hospital strike. So we saw the price of oil spike up yesterday on that news, and it doesn't look like there's a tremendous amount of interest right now among the rest of the Arab world for an oil embargo against Israel. They're a minor importer anyway, but what this is important to note is that, there's talk now of weaponizing these oil exports, and so there's a reason that the price of oil went up on this news, and that is because there's a real possibility here that global oil supplies could be disrupted as a result of ongoing tensions. And now let's get into why I think these are about to get a lot worse. So this is from the TASS Russian news agency. And, I like to get news for all of you from a variety of sources because, as I've mentioned before, the first victim of war is the truth here. And so you got to take all of these reports with a grain of salt. But in this case, we're actually just going to look at what Vladimir Putin actually said. So here's the headline. Putin orders permanent patrolling of Black Sea airspace by Kinzhal armed planes. So what this is, there are MiG-31s now being deployed to the Black Sea. They're going to be running these constant air patrols. And the Kinzhal systems, these are hypersonic ballistic missiles. They have a range of over 1,000 kilometers and a speed up to Mach 9. Putin specified that in this speech. And so this is the quote from him. Under my order, the Russian aerospace forces begin patrolling the neutral airspace over the Black Sea on a permanent basis. Our MiG-31 planes are armed with Kinzhal systems. Yeah, so, and then he said, this is not a threat. Well, that's kind of how you can tell it is one, right? Again, nothing is as it seems in this environment, but this is obviously a none too veiled threat against the U.S. carriers, which he also mentioned in this press conference. He said, plus, all of this is happening amid the conflict in the Middle East. All of this escalates. Now they pulled 2 aircraft carrier groups into the Mediterranean. So we've mentioned before in recent episodes about how the U.S. carrier, USS Gerald R. Ford, stationed there in the Eastern Mediterranean, is a big juicy target for whoever happens to be the first one to take a shot at it, whether it be the Russians with their hypersonic Kinzhal missiles, which certainly could pose a threat to all of those ships. Could be the Iranians. The Iranians allegedly also have their own domestically produced hypersonic ballistic missiles. You've also got Hezbollah. I'm sure they have some anti-ship weapons. So the point is that this escalation, things are ratcheting up. There are more and more advanced weapons being deployed here, and people get an itchy trigger finger. So we need to be on the lookout here. This is not a good sign. And if you want to get an idea of why this is likely to strengthen the relations between the Chinese and the Russians and the Arab world, which is a dynamic we are already seeing play out here, we got Shiny Shinyman saying a third U.S. carrier group is now being deployed to the Red Sea. The USS Baton yet, but you guys can confirm that. You can put it in the chat if you find a source for that. Let me know what you think. Real quick, what do you think? Do you think that this is ratcheting down, or are we seeing an escalation? Put a 1 in the chat if you think things are headed on a trajectory of escalation. Put a 2 if you think that everything is going to be just dandy here. I'd be interested to get your opinion on that. But the U.S. has vetoed a UN call for a humanitarian pause and corridors into Gaza. So the U.S. using its UN Security Council veto to veto this plan for a pause. So this is not going to help with perceptions of the U.S. and Israel across the Arab world. Again, this is very likely going to lead to enhanced calls for de-dollarization. Really, we're just witnessing the setup here for what is likely to be a very problematic year, let's say, in 2024. When we're wrapping this year up, things just have been on a very downward trajectory. What else can I say? And I'm not trying to be alarmist or anything, but you need to pay attention to this because we're in a situation where things could pop off at any moment. You could see a U.S. strike on Hezbollah. You could see a Hezbollah strike on Israel. Hezbollah may very well take a Israeli invasion of Gaza, which is in the final stages of preparation as a cue to launch their own attacks. But should we get a major escalation like that, not just veiled threats, but actual kinetic action, expect the price of crude oil to move up much, much higher very quickly. Yesterday's spike up was just a preview, I think. Thank you so much, SGT Stacking. Knowledge is power, absolutely. And as you say, escalation is imminent. And of course, maybe it's not. Maybe a month from now, a year from now, people will say, well, Smart Silver Stacker was just crying wolf. And I honestly hope that's the case, because if this escalates the way that there's a strong possibility of, an occurrence here of an escalation, it's going to be very negative for the U.S. economy. Again, we've already got the yield on the 10-year Treasury up to over 4.9%. Last time it was this high was right before the Great Recession and the financial crisis of 2007, 2008. The only difference between then and now is that the debt levels across the system, whether it be consumer debt, government debt, corporate debt, the piles of low yielding US bonds that these banks are sitting on, all of these problems are far worse today than they ever were back in 2006, 2007, 2008. In fact, they're basically the same problems that were just papered over with the response to that crisis. They're just like on steroids now, and we're on the verge of a major war. Add that into the mix. So you can see why, crude oil spiking up to $150 or $200 or $300 overnight could be a huge problem. And, listen, stacking gold and silver is very important. I would also be taking care of your other basics right now. If you don't have some food put away, maybe a good time to do that. Inflation could really run out of control in a very nasty way here should this thing pop off. And so, get prepared. One way that, the U.S. is taking this seriously and they are preparing for conflict is this is from the U.S. State Department yesterday. A travel advisory, level 4, do not travel. It's fairly uncommon for the State Department to issue a war of this severity. They are now allowing non-emergency personnel to be removed on a case-by-case basis. The family members of U.S. government personnel there being evacuated. They say it's because the unpredictable security situation related to rocket, missile, and artillery exchanges between Israel and Hezbollah. They spelled Hezbollah, kind of interesting there in the State Department. Maybe that's the alternate spelling, or other armed militant factions. Reconsider travel to Lebanon due to terrorism, unrest, armed conflict, crime, kidnapping, and embassies, Beirut's limited capacity to provide support to U.S. citizens. And of course, one of the things we witnessed following the tragic hospital attack was that many of these U.S. and Israeli embassies are coming under threat throughout the Arab world, and that's not a good sign. That's not the sort of thing that you see, embassies being locked down, embassies being evacuated, embassies being lit on fire in a situation that is de-escalating. Now, if you want to know the real reason why the State Department is evacuating them, at least, in my assessment, of course, you got to take everything I say with a grain of salt. I'm just a guy on YouTube. None of this is financial advice. None of this is, an expert opinion. I'm just kind of an informed person, I think. I try to stay informed, and I try to help with keeping people informed with this channel. But this headline from Reuters, now this is from August 8th, so way before any of this kicked off, 2 months ago. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, not that long ago, but it sure seems like a long time. But look at what this headline says. Israel threatens to return Lebanon to Stone Age in any war with Hezbollah. So, yeah, you might want to get out of Lebanon in the event that Israel decides to return them to the Stone Age. And that could mean a lot of things. Usually, what's the quote from Albert Einstein? He said, I know not what weapons World War III will be fought with, but World War IV will be fought with sticks and stones. And I'm paraphrasing there, but that's the gist of it. And so when you start talking about returning a country to the Stone Age, you got to wonder what kind of weapons Israel is referring to here. I mean, are they talking about popping a nuke on Hezbollah? It's possible. They're surrounded. There's about 10 million Israelis, and the entirety of the Muslim world is something like 2 billion people. So, Israel is surrounded by a lot of unfriendly folks, and I'm trying to remain objective here, just looking at things from a objective standpoint, but I think it's highly likely that should they feel that they face an existential threat, which I think you can make the argument that that would be the case should Hezbollah decide to get involved. Keep in mind, Hezbollah is very well equipped. They got about 100,000 fighters. They're trained and armed by the IRGC, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps. So, a very well-equipped fighting force here. The Israelis, who are getting ready to invade Gaza, to deal with Hamas, would be very hard-pressed to fight a conventional war on two fronts. So, if there's going to be a nuclear exchange in the Middle East, Lebanon could potentially be a site, or maybe even Syria. The Syria airports. I think the Aleppo airport, one of their other airports, have been getting struck by Israeli forces who are trying to stop Iran from moving weapons in to arm Hezbollah fighters who likely are getting into position. Yesterday, we covered the story that Hezbollah was disabling the Israeli security cameras on the border. So, a lot of signs that this could pop off. Will Israel deploy a nuke? I mean, that's obviously a lot of speculation on my part, but if they do, imagine what's going to happen to the price of oil. It's not going to be good, folks. It's going to be a real problem. Now, let's see what else we got here. Yeah, one thing, as I've mentioned, there's a lot of uncertainty here, but one thing that's guaranteed is we are going to be borrowing a lot of money for these conflicts. This is from yesterday. Biden considering $100 billion funding request that includes Israel and Ukraine aid. And I believe he is presenting this to Congress either today or tomorrow, sometime in the very near future. Also, keep an eye out. We're going to be getting an address from our illustrious leader, this guy right here. I mean, that instills confidence, doesn't it? You know, and in a video I put out, one of these videos I did live streams, I referred to Biden as a top-notch diplomat and a silver-tongued devil, and I think some people thought I was being serious. I don't know. Try to detect the sarcasm here, folks. Maybe I'm a little too deadpan in my delivery, but I don't know. Is that a face that instills a lot of confidence for you? Not for me. I'll get that off the camera there. But yeah, we're going to be borrowing a lot of money, folks. $100 billion for Ukraine and for Israel. Wow, I just looked at the debt clock. I hadn't even looked at this today. Look at that. That went up a lot. $33.652 trillion. Maybe we're back to the $25 billion a day spread. That went up a lot between yesterday and today. I think almost $50 billion, because yesterday I was looking at this and it was 3.59 or something along those lines. So yeah, the debt clock, national debt exploding. And no wonder the yield on U.S. Treasuries is exploding, right? Because they're selling a lot of them. They're increasing the supply. And remember, as the yield goes up on treasuries, on bonds, the value is declining. It represents a sell-off or an increase in supply. So, not only are we borrowing money at an absolute breakneck speed, a huge pace, but the yield, the rates at which we are borrowing, that is increasing. So expect the interest payments to absolutely explode. Another thing we need to watch out for domestically, we covered recently the FBI director warning of domestic terror attacks. Well, now we've got Homeland Security seeing heightened threat environment in the U.S. So what are we getting set up here for, folks? Remember, I mean, all this stuff is kind of hidden in plain sight. Before any of these things pop off, it's sort of like, condition people using the mainstream for that. So get prepared, and don't be scared. I'm not trying to fearmonger or anything, but look, this is the official word from Homeland Security, heightened threat environment. I don't think that that's too shocking to anybody who is paying attention. I mean, both Iran and Palestine in the past have been known to operate via lone wolf terror attacks. Certainly, there were a lot of hijackings and stuff back in the 60s and 70s. I wasn't around back then, but I'm sure some of you remember that. Put a 1 in the chat if you were around when those string of Palestinian plane hijackings back in the earlier version of this conflict that we're witnessing play out right now. And by the way, we got 468 people in this chat. That's good. That means that people are paying attention. That's a little above average. And I do just want to ask a quick favor to all of you who are watching. Please smash the like button. Please help get this information out there, because people need to be getting prepared, and especially we have to understand how this affects us from a financial standpoint. I mean, there's a lot of things you need to be preparing for right now, but like I said, there's a lot of uncertainty here. Will Israel pop a nuke in Lebanon? Will Iran launch an oil embargo? Will the Arab world adopt a gold currency? Who knows? But clearly, one thing that is for sure is this number, the U.S. national debt, is going to absolutely explode moving forward. I mean, again, I don't have the debt to the penny numbers pulled up. I'm not going to look at it right now, but maybe we'll do that tomorrow. This had kind of taken a little bit of a breather in the pace that it was increasing, but now $33.65 trillion. That means between today and yesterday, we borrowed another $50 billion or something like that. And, this is pretty shocking. It's like we don't have money to offer aid to people in Hawaii whose homes built down. Would they get a $700 check? Meanwhile, we're dumping literally hundreds of billions of dollars into these conflicts. And when you put that into perspective, it's pretty amazing. I think the biggest military budget in Europe is something like $50 billion or less. And so, these are absolutely enormous military spending commitments on the part of the US. This will lead to higher inflation. I mean, we've talked before about how war is massively inflationary, and that has been evidenced in many historical examples. I mean, World War One's a good one. World War One, the credit expansion from the First World War led to directly the Roaring Twenties. It was a huge contributor to that, and ultimately the crash that we got in the Great Depression. So. Don't listen to the folks who tell you that war is good for the economy. We might find out just how good war is for the economy. And yeah, sure, if you're holding Raytheon or McDonnell Douglas stock, if you're Lindsey Graham out there talking up attacks on Iranian oil infrastructure and you are in bed with the military industrial complex, sure, you might do well. But for me, I'm not looking forward to paying $10 or $20 a gallon for gas. I'm not looking forward to my monthly grocery bill being in the thousands of dollars because the price of oil explodes. That's not going to be good for the economy. So, listen, folks, we're heading to war, I think. I could be wrong, of course. What do I know? I'm not an expert on any of this stuff, but we're going to continue covering this as it plays out. We'll continue to talk about the effects on the world and on the economy. Obviously, when you see Malaysia talking about trying to get the Islamic world onto a gold standard, then we need to be paying attention to that. Someone in the chat just says, "Who do you support?" Well, I support myself, my family, my friends, this audience. That's who I support. I'm not trying to pick sides in a foreign conflict. George Washington. Let's wrap this up with just a little history lesson here about how the U.S. became this, kind of imperial force that likes to stick our fingers in the business of all these wars around the world. So, I think it was Washington's farewell address, he warned us about getting involved in the machinations of foreign nations. I think he specifically mentioned Europe, but I'm sure he would have the same opinion about Southeast Asia and the Middle East. And they used to read that address annually to kids in the U.S. And then, we got Wilson in World War One, Woodrow Wilson, this Wilsonian idea that we need to go around the world and police the world and protect democracy. And that was kind of the end of U.S. non-intervention around the world. I mean, certainly, there had been some wars and stuff that we had gotten involved in before then, but that really was the beginning of this. And, it's very interesting that since that time, that was also when the Federal Reserve was created, right around that time in 1913. And we've seen the value of the US dollar eviscerated by something like 97% since that time. And we've seen huge amounts of borrowing, a huge expansion of the military industrial complex, something that Dwight Eisenhower, ironically, as we see the aircraft carrier bearing his name heading to the Middle East, he warned us in his farewell address. You can go find that on YouTube. It's a good watch. But he warned us about the possibility of a military industrial complex arising here in the U.S. And that's what we're watching here, folks. So again, people have been warning about this for a long time. It's been a long time in the works. And now we're about to reap the benefits of this, unfortunately. So let me know what you think in the comments down below. I always appreciate hearing from each and every one of you. And thank you all so much who smashed that like button. We're over 200 likes. That's awesome. I love getting to 200 before the end of a live stream. I appreciate that tremendously. And I hope that you're all just staying safe, getting prepared. Don't be scared as this plays out. Pay attention, keep your head on a swivel, and get prepared. That's the right move if you ask me. And with that being said, stay safe and happy stacking, everybody. Smart Silver Stacker out.